I propose to consider the question, can machines think? In 1950, Alan Turing proposed that the day computers could fool a human into believing they were talking to another human was the day they truly had the ability to think. This was the Turing Test. This was Joseph Weizenbaum, and he was the creator of the first intelligent chatbot called Eliza. It was the first mainstream attempt at passing the Turing test. It acted as a psychiatrist who consoled its user, and it did that often by just repeating what its user said. This was the Imitation Game. Weizenbaum realized that humans are actually very easy to fool, his secretary being probably the most famous example.
And I asked her to my office and sat her down at the keyboard, and then she began to type. And of course, I looked over her shoulder to make sure that everything was operating properly. After 2 or 3 interchanges with the machine, she turned to me and she said, "Would you mind leaving the room, please?"
Eliza had tricked her. She knew it couldn't understand, but she had become comfortable with it. This was how computers used to pass the Turing test, by mimicking the user, not by actually thinking.
With AI assist, for AI to respond.
The AI platform.
AI and a machine learning engineer to advance the law.
We now have intelligent AI models that do what Eliza did, but just much better. Eliza was rule-based. It would find keywords and mix them into pre-written responses. But that also sometimes meant that Eliza's words didn't make sense. Today we have ChatGPT, or Claude, or Gemini, LLMs. They're a different type of generative AI that still just imitate. When you use an LLM, your prompt gets tokenized and converted into vectors, basically numbers that represent what you said. And using its training data, it creates a probability-based list of the most likely next token to output. But that's different from thinking. What if the Turing test was never meant to test machines? What if it was meant to test us? LLMs have just become better at repeating the most likely answer, just like Eliza. Theoretically, they should be passing the Turing test. They should have the ability to think, just like a human being. But Professor John Searle makes probably the most convincing argument against this.
Imagine I'm locked in a room, and I got a huge box full of Chinese symbols. I don't know any Chinese, just so many squiggle signs to me. Now they bring in another box full of Chinese symbols, and they give me a bunch of rules in English for matching these symbols. Now let's suppose they give me in another little batch of Chinese symbols, together with some more rules in English for shuffling these symbols around, only this time I give them back some Chinese symbols, and me they call the computer.
This is a Chinese room argument. The computer inside the room doesn't know Chinese, but it can still write poetry and stories in the language, because it has a bunch of Chinese characters, and it has a rulebook that tells it how to use them. But that isn't thinking, it's just following rules. Modern AI shouldn't pass the Turing test because we know they can't actually comprehend the responses they give. But the Turing test stated, if a computer can convince a human it's talking to another human, it has the ability to think. And clearly it can do that, quite a lot. So how does the AI pass the Turing test if we know it can't actually think? Repeating what its user said, by mimicking the user. It would find keywords, most likely next token. It's just following rules. Yeah, by mimicking its user. That is how today's machines trick their users into believing they can comprehend. The Turing test doesn't actually measure the intelligence of a computer. It measures how easily a human can be convinced. Eliza didn't understand a single word, but people still trusted it. Today's AIs don't understand any better, but they've become so good at the imitation game that we trust them even more. maybe this was the wrong question the whole time. Maybe we should be asking, why are humans so easy to convince that computers can think?